Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today I'm going to be doing a reading that is a little bit different. It's a psychic reading, and you could consider her as a celebrity. She is well known. This is for Coleen Rowley. I think I pronounced her name right. She is a whistleblower and also a former FBI agent for the United States government. And so when I am doing these readings, this was suggested by a friend. And I really like the idea. So I will be doing, like I said, different type of readings on my channel. This one in particular is a little different. So those of you that would be tuning in who haven't heard the term whistleblower, you're probably thinking, what is that? What does that mean? So I put the definition here on the screen so that you can see it. It's a person who informs on a person or organization engaged in an illicit activity, or basically illegal activity, or activity that is not deemed as right. And so she was a former FBI agent for many years during the 70s or 80s. I believe it was the 80s, all the way up until the 2000s. And she was assigned, she's from Iowa, I believe, originally, or that's where she's at now. But she was originally stationed in around the 2001 when 9/11 happened. She was stationed around Minnesota. And so there in Minnesota, she was a part of that FBI division. They had received tips and had leads that there was going to be an attack on the trade centers, the World Trade Centers there in New York, the 9/11 attack. They had the information, and basically the government didn't do anything about it. Like, nothing was done. So I'm just giving you the backstory of what happened. So she let them know. Later on, she wrote like to the one of the, I guess, the FBI agents, like one of the main heads there in the FBI department, and basically wrote a letter letting them know all their findings and that they had that information. But they didn't do anything with the information that had been given to them, that knowledge that had been given to them prior. You have to understand that when it comes to the FBI, they are they're in communication, regardless of there's different divisions stationed in different cities. You know, when they get information like that, it's shared through a database, and it's something that, you know, that they all would have that information right then and there popping up on their screens wherever they're at. So it was like she knew a lot of these things that were going on, but why didn't the government do anything about it? And I think that was one of the biggest questions that she had as well. You know, why didn't you know, the Washington D.C. do anything about 9/11, knowing it? It's because I feel like they knew that there was a lot of flukes, a lot of deception around this, and they didn't want the government to look bad. They didn't want Washington D.C. to look bad when it came to this. But she was a very brave woman to do that at that time, and I believe it was President Bush that was there as a president during all of this. But this was a time, you know, where she took a chance. You know, a lot of people think that whistleblowers get paid money to spy or to do these kind of things, you know, but I don't feel like Coleen did it out of that. She is when I tune into her soul, I get someone who is very just. I feel like she doesn't like anything that is, she grew up with morals and values. So I feel like anything that is deemed secretive or that would be a lie, she wouldn't be a part of it. It's just not of her teaching. It's not of her stature. Even though she did receive training from the FBI to be kind of like disconnected from her emotions and stuff, she is still human at the end of the day. And I feel like her conscience wouldn't have let her have that information or be privy to that information and not share it with the government, you know, and the other people that she knew about this, and they practically didn't do anything with it. They took it as, you know, like just something that, you know, was just passive. So everybody that, you know, that was in New York around 2001 when the 9/11 attack happened, a lot of people know that or blame the government for having some kind of knowledge to this, or that this was orchestrated by the government. And it's been you know, there's been conspiracies and different theories and whatnot, but it all boils down to that the government had this information and they didn't do anything to take it more seriously than what it was. And so there was a certain level of responsibility and lack of responsibility that that falls on the presidency during that time, during the administration, during that time, and that department. So I feel like she took chances, and she knew that by doing so that she could, lose her job. There is an OSHA law that was passed in the 1970s, I believe, that protects whistleblowers from being fired, or employers retaliating because of that. So I think it's the OSHA Act, but it's part of OSHA. And so, and for those of you that are wondering what is OSHA, it's basically a law that's passed that protects the rights of employees who are, I guess, like under sexual harassment or any kind of harassment, that report activities to their supervisors or, within a company, and the company wants to retaliate and fire them because, they called them out on some activity that wasn't morally accepted or morally correct. So that's just a basic definition, just to give you the gist of what that is. But I do get with Coleen that she was raised very strict. I feel like she is a very honest person, and she has a lot of masculine energy when it comes to her soul. She's very feminine. She is a lady, but what I'm getting at is that we all have a duality, like I've said in different videos, when it comes to our soul. So I feel like during the time that she was in the FBI and she was in that agency, she had to kind of, be like a man in many ways. She had to, think like a man, and really just make decisions not based on emotion, but based on what was right and what's wrong. And I feel like she did well in coming out and letting people know, what she felt and what she knew. And now she is retired from the FBI, and she does public speaking and talks about, these kind of things, teaching people and educating them about ethics and stuff like that. So what I get is that during the time of the 9/11 things, there was a lot of discussions that she would have had with the higher ups. I do feel like she was given ultimatum. Either she would, she was given an ultimatum. Either she would, step down from her position as an FBI agent eventually, or there would be repercussions if she was to go out and write a book about, all of this later on. I feel like there was a lot of threats, and there was a lot of that's the vibes that I'm getting. Even though it may not have been like a threat, like, we're gonna hurt you, there was a threat about her position, security, and her reputation, knowing and having this kind of information, and letting it, out to the public without the government doing it first. Because you have to understand, they're federal employees, they work directly for the government, and they are there are laws that they cannot disclose any certain types of information, well, basically any confidential information. And these documents at the time were confidential. They weren't public knowledge. They didn't become public knowledge until after investigations had taken place. So I do feel like she was very much, there was conversations exchanged. There was some threats, perhaps, that her family would have received, not necessarily from her, the government or from the agency that she worked in, but people later on from 9/11 that would have known that she was the one that, had kind of written this and had this information. I think a lot of people thought, hey, that's good that you had this information, but why didn't you do anything about it or say anything to anyone? But you have to understand her position. She was restricted in what she could say, because, she could have run the risk of actually being put in jail, put in prison for, or just being, released from her position with no credentials at all. So she took a risk, and I feel like in many ways she doesn't feel vindicated, or she doesn't feel like, that things turned out the way that she would have liked to, but ultimately she did take a chance. And I do feel like there was three key people in her department that were all like, perhaps like, she was one of them, but there was two others, but it's a set of three, in which they all knew, and they all felt in a way kind of like they were all in risk. Their jobs were all at risk at that time for having this information, and not the government not acting anything on it. It ultimately, she felt like they were going to come back on her and her colleagues that would have known, and they would have been the ones to take all the blame, and it would have been all twisted. So rather than seeing her like walk away from the situation, I feel like she stayed very much in this for over 2 or 3 years after 9/11, and finally the pressure became too much. I feel like it did take a toll on her her relationship and her children, her family, and so she decided to retire in 2004. And I feel like that was one of the best decisions that she could have made. I feel like she would have stayed longer, but I also feel like she retired because it was just becoming a mess. In her opinion, I feel like there was a lot of other things that I won't discuss, but a lot of other things that she would have known and things that she would have endured while in her position as an FBI agent for Minnesota Department. There was a lot of things that she would have seen. So these are things that I don't think she's ever going to talk about publicly. Maybe her family knows, her husband and her children, but I don't feel like she would actually come out and talk about these things because, again, um, once you're a part of the FBI or the government agent, a government agent, you are bound to secrecy for life. There's certain things that you cannot discuss, things that are top secret. You can't talk about it, and that's what I get from her. Like when I get into her interviews, like her lips are sealed in many ways. She can't say certain things, but she kinds of use. Well, I can't say that kinds of doesn't make sense, but she does use her platform to sort of get her point across, in many ways. So she does use her public speaking and her teaching to people to educate them about, coming out and just really standing up for what's ethically right and morally right. But I do feel like, she's been working very hard on other things. She's enjoying her life now a little bit more. There's more freedom to just be her. In many ways, I do feel like she went through a period of depression. And who wouldn't? I mean, this is something really big when you're considered a whistleblower. It's almost like being considered a rat in organized crime. When there's an organized crime and you rat someone out, it's like you're considered a rat. In many ways, I feel like that's how people in the government, would have viewed her at that time and how she felt, isolated. I do feel like she was targeted. She was isolated by her own colleagues and people in the government agencies after coming out with this, public knowledge, and that she had wrote this paper and this document and had, given it to people in the government to she wanted to know why. So I just get that, her home life during that time would not have been the best. And this has changed her forever. She's never going to be that same Coleen that was innocent and went into becoming an FBI agent, before all of this went down. That was a different Coleen in the 80s than it is now. And I think we all evolve, we all grow, and we all change. But being that she took the stand and is now labeled as a whistleblower, I feel like there's a lot of famous whistleblowers that do this, but she really, a lot of people admire her and a lot of people still kind of blame her in many ways. But I feel like she did what she was guided by, her higher self and her consciousness. So I feel like in many ways this was something that had to happen in her life. It was an event that had to take place because it showed and kind of opened the eyes at that time. And even now, it's opened the eyes to America that there are flaws within our system and there are secrets within our system, and that our administration is not perfect. Our government is not perfect, even though it does try its hardest to protect the American people and to give freedom. And I think this is not just the government, but any business, any large entity, corporate, companies, there's always a dysfunctional thing in there. Every company has secrets, from the top executive to the lower one. So those of you that would be listening to this, don't feel like I'm targeting the government. I love and respect our American government and our FBI agents, and I feel like, they do what they're supposed to do. Do I support everything that is being done or things that are, injustices? No. But I'm not going to sit here and bash the government, because we all have to have a system, and only they know why they do the things, and the universe knows why things happen the way that they do. So I'm just, wanting to do this kind of video to kind of, bring to light that there are a lot of people who have privilege information and that have disseminated some of this knowledge to the public, and have been titled as whistleblowers. But at the same time, there's always a price to pay with anything that you do, whether it's fame, fortune, it's being a whistleblower, it's being a person who works undercover. There's always a price to pay. And it's like, you can do so much right in the world, but then regardless of how much right you do and how much, you love and give to others, there's always going to be something in return that is not negative. And I feel like this is, the theme of light versus dark. Without light, there wouldn't be any dark, and without any dark, there wouldn't be any light. And it's like the yin, the yang. It's all of it together. This is. But I feel like, when it comes to Coleen, is that she she has a lot of regrets in life, and she's like, what if I feel like she's thought about, what if I would have taken a different path instead of becoming an FBI agent? Would I have been happier? And I feel like she would have, but she was used instrumentally. Her soul was used by the universe in many ways to kind of open the eyes of humanity and let people know, like I said, that there are flaws within the system. There's flaws within the highest organizations, and it's things that came out when there was the presidential election between, Trump and Hillary. And, all these things came to the light about the emails and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to get into the too much into political and things like that. I don't really enjoy politics at all. And I believe there's a fine line, but this, I kind of kept this a little bit more away from politics, but still explaining a lot of these things that are going on. But I feel like she's going to be okay. I do feel like she struggles every day. There is not a level of happiness. I feel like, there are moments when she has happiness, but there's moments when she's sad, and she just, thinks about, why couldn't she be a little bit braver? I think she's a little harsh on herself, and she thinks, maybe she should have done more, but I think she did just enough to become someone who is going to go down in history as someone who cared and had the information, and she did do her best to share it. But again, like I said, there was a lot of hands at play, people that were more powerful than her that had more say, and so her hands were tied. She really couldn't do more. But people listening to this that, are into politics and that know a lot about whistleblowers, they may have a different opinion. You may have a different opinion about Coleen, and think that she was wrong, and that she's responsible for not, giving this information out to the public. But then again, you have to understand her position, and you have to understand that at what cost would it would have affected her family, and everybody if she would have gone out into the public and made, like with the news media, and had a field day with this information, and not just, giving it out to the government and keeping it within, that organization. So I feel like she's a very brave lady. I really think that she is a strong woman, very courageous, and I feel like, she was divinely guided to do this. So that is my reading on Coleen Rowley, or Coleen. I hope I said her name right all throughout this reading. But if you'd like to set up a private reading with me, you can go to my website. That's www.raymondguzman.net/shop. Also, be sure to check out my new show. It's called Tea with Spirit. It airs every Monday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 3 p.m. Pacific Time. So just watch that. I basically answer the top 5 questions. It's like the psychic version of Dear Abby. That's what it's being referred to. And I answer the top 5 questions of people all around the world that send me emails, or an email submission, one question. You can submit one question to me if you have a question about your life, spiritual topic, to raymondguzman@hotmail.com. In the subject line of your email, put Tea with Spirit, and I will select 5 every week to do that. So this, if you haven't caught episode 1 and 2 of Tea with Spirit, go ahead and check out my playlist on my channel. It is there. check out those episodes, and then I will be doing episode 3 on Monday. So also be sure to check out my new book. It's called Starseed Footsteps. It is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You can order it directly from me for an autographed copy on my website, and that link is also just listed in the description box below. Blessings and love and light. Have an amazing day.